Hola, you're listening to LatinxAmerica with Adriana Flores Tragade. I'm happy to have Jesse Martinez as our first guest. He is a founder, tech entrepreneur, investor, and philanthropist. He's originally from Houston, Texas, and found his way to San Francisco in 1997, where he first experienced what it meant to work for a startup. As employee 27, he got to see firsthand the building of a Silicon Valley company, which was funded by Sequoia Capital. That company ultimately grew into a 1,000-employee-plus corporation, all in less than a year, as it was acquired for $180 million by Frontier Communications. That experience and access to his new mentors and advisors led Jesse to co-found, along with his brother, in 1998, one of the first U.S. online bilingual Latino communities called Picosito.com, which was recognized by a U.S. congressional record by the House of Representatives in 1999 for their efforts around technology in the Latino community. They raised $2.3 million in seed capital and had 2 acquisition offers in less than 6 months. After the dot-com era, Jesse went back to corporate America. He has over 10 years in the BPM industry and has worked with industry leaders such as Xerox Global Services, Icon, and Kofax as a business development manager. He was also the founder of his second startup called Gigo, a Groupon-like venture delivering their messaging all in Espanol. He was the co-founder and CEO of his third startup, Relevance, which took him to Brazil as the country director under the Startup Brazil program. Jesse is the co-founder and co-chair of the Latino Startup Alliance, a nonprofit supporting global Latino tech entrepreneurs and startup ecosystems. He is also the co-founder of DevMission, a nonprofit focused on training diverse youth ages 16 to 24 for careers in tech. Most recently, Jesse was the first entrepreneur in residence for the Salesforce Incubator, which is called Accelerate, where he incubated his forward startup called Career Force. In his free time, Jesse likes participating in hackathons, outdoor sports, triathlons, and most importantly, he likes to support other entrepreneurs such as myself. Jesse, let's start by getting to know you a little bit. First of all, thank you for being with us today. You're an extremely well-regarded, a mentor, a sponsor to many of us in Silicon Valley. And we wanted to learn a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, well, thank you again for having me, Adriana. I'm excited to be part of this podcast and really looking forward to hearing the future speakers as well. And so it's funny that you bring up padrino. It's a funny word. So I've been in the Bay Area in San Francisco over 20 years, born and raised in Houston. My parents are from Mexico, and I made it out here in 97 to work for a startup. And with that startup, I was actually employee 27. We were funded by Sequoia Capital. We were one of 2 pioneers in the web hosting services space. And so we were hosting marquee brands such as Yahoo and Netscape and others. And so in less than a year, we went from a startup to part of a public company, trading at $35 a share via 2 acquisitions. And so that was my first-hand experience of Silicon Valley, tech, startups, and also stock options. But the funny story about this is that I was actually residing in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I was at the bookstore, Barnes & Noble, when we used to have them, one weekend. And I was going through the paper, and for whatever reason, I went through the classified ads. And there was an ad that caught my eye. And it said internet sales for internet company. And so I faxed in my resume, when we used to use fax machines, and I got a call back. So I did my phone screens and did my phone in-person interviews, and it went great. And so that's how I got introduced to the world of tech back in early 97.
So that was your journey to Silicon Valley. Jesse, this podcast is about how technology can try to solve or address issues impacting the Latinx community. In your opinion, what are some of the most pressing issues impacting our community right now?
Well, I think that most of us know that it's certainly education, health, and then finance. And then the last piece is housing. Housing is a big issue for many here in the Bay Area. And so how do we leverage technology to help address some of these issues? that we face as a community. And that's where the power of technology can play a role. And so just thinking about education, what's taking place, being able to now learn online from all these various schools and universities, as well as a lot of free content. So, there's no issue about access for the most part. When you think about health, it's just, how do we educate our Latino community more about eating right, and also just taking care of yourself, as well as topics that, relate to mental health, right, which is usually pretty taboo in the Latino community, I would say. And so how do we make more people aware, make people more comfortable, and hearing and telling people what they could be doing for themselves. And then wealth is a big piece as well. So there's all these financial tools that are online. There's also these apps, just like Robinhood, right, where you can download it and trade for free, buy stocks for free. And so now giving access to those that didn't have access before.
So having access to wealth, but also I think you make a really good point. It's access to information and those resources that you as an individual can use to better yourself or to create something as well.
Yes, that's so true.
Now that we've identified these issues that are important, can you share what technology companies are working to address those issues? Do you have any in mind? I know you mentioned Robinhood for wealth creation. Are there others that you heard of or work with?
Yeah, actually, when I think about education, right? There's there's tools and resources just on LinkedIn, but even stepping below that, there's a lot of stuff on YouTube as well. And then you think about the online universities and being able to access to content that come from some of the top schools, which at times can also be free. And so being able to just leverage those resources that cover many universities, as well as others like Coursera, Udemy, Udacity, and so there starts to be a long list.
So there's no excuse for saying I don't have access to information or I don't have access to the content and the expert curriculum, because there are top tier universities that are creating those courses with these companies, and they're trying to equalize the playing field for someone here or maybe someone abroad or in a different part of the country. So everyone is using the same curriculum to learn and to improve.
Right, that's correct. And then, I mean, even if you don't have access at home, because there are some that don't have broadband at home, which is unfortunate, you can go to your local library and access the internet that way. In addition, I'm being told that if you get a library card, you'll be able to access some other online learning tools as well for free.
And that's education. In health, I know you and I were talking about biohacking and some of the things that
Yes.
you've been learning about biohacking, as well as improving your diet. And
Right. Well, I'm no more spring chicken here. And so I take a look at, what can I do to keep healthy, right? So all under my thesis of, strong body, right? Healthy mind. And so being able to access the resources, podcasts, websites, etc., and just learning, what you should be drinking, what supplements you should be taking, and then just participating in, events that take place. And so hopefully we can host a biohack and introduce our community into biohacking.
that would be great. I think I'm going to look forward to getting an episode going on biohacking, because I thought what you were sharing earlier was really interesting. One of the things that we talk about with, especially with your experience, is that you've actually done it. You had 4 different startups, and you are in the middle of thinking of AI and VR and what that is going to be doing to our community in terms of whether it's labor displacement or whether it's labor enhancement, because they could be retrained to do something else and work with new technologies.
Right.
But what are your thoughts in terms of someone listening, thinking about, we're launching our own startup and we really don't know what process to follow? What would be your advice?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing is ensuring that you become part of that community that you're, one, serving, and then two, the community that also represents some of the work that you're doing. And so in the case of AI, well, who's in the field of AI, right? What are the events? What are the meetups? What are the summits? What are the conferences? Who are your peers that are working on something on AI? And then who are the thought leaders as well, so that you can follow them, learn from them, and then perhaps even bring them on board as an advisor. And so it's just making sure that you're well rooted into those ecosystems, right? So that you can be learning from the best, and also being able to leverage the support, the resources that they may have.
And create a network and like-minded people that are interested in some of the same technology, and they could potentially be your partners, right?
Exactly. In the same situation with AR, VR as well. And so, in the case of AI, just a few months ago, we didn't have a community of Latinos working in AI. And so I was able to join with others to build our first Latinx in AI group. And so now we're over 70 members, and we're working towards our first AI FinTech Summit, which will be in July of this year.
July 21st of this year in
Yes,
San Francisco?
in San Francisco on a Saturday,
Yep.
8 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Perfect. For those on listening to us, what is AI? What is VR? What are some of these new technologies that are emerging, and why should we care about them?
Yeah, no, those are great questions. And so, well, with VR, it's being able to have the ability to, again, use technology to, one, create a world for yourself and others. And so that could be in the form of, graphics. And then the second piece is being able to immerse someone in another world. And so how do you take someone that may be unfortunately disabled, but take them on a trip around the world? And so what is that VR experience that you can provide, as well as how to use VR for medical reasons? And so, our soldiers with PTSD, how do we help provide therapy by using and leveraging VR? And then when it comes to AI, there's so many applications. I mean, I think some of us are subjects of AI and we don't even know it, but when you're typing your Google email and it's providing a word for you already, that's leveraging AI, right? Same thing on your iPhone when you're typing in text and it puts a word in for you, that's leveraging AI, because it's taking data sets from previous behavior, right, or actions, and it's saying, well, we believe Jesse meant this word, just based on that first word that you put in.
Is that autocorrect?
And then you have the downside where you have the autocorrect,
especially when you write in Espanol with the autocorrect.
Yeah, and then you have the case with around Amazon, and should they sell their face recognition technology to the military? And so you have the pros and cons there, right? Yes, it can be good, but then what's the bad that can be done as well?
So those are some ethical questions too that that come along with as new technologies kind of emerge. I really like the examples that you provided because they're real. Because if we have a Latino out there thinking about joining a startup or learning about a certain technology, the examples that you gave, like providing counseling to a soldier abroad, the PTSD counseling, that's very real, and you don't have to have the technology skills, yet you will more than likely benefit from using that technology to help others. So
exactly.
Those are perfect examples.
Exactly, and we have to, and sometimes it's just bringing the awareness of these tools, right, and technology to our communities so that they know about it, right? So that the awareness and then the access.
The awareness and the access. And then we also want to make sure that we motivate our community to participate and to get jobs in those industries, because I think as a Latino, you bring a different perspective. You bring a certain level of cultural competency that will help design some of the tools. I remember talking to my daughter about she was the only girl in an engineering class during one of her summer camps last year, and we were talking about how she was a little intimidated because everyone there, obviously, they were little boys, and they were great, but she's like, I'm not sure that I want to go back. I'm not sure that I want to go back to class because I'm the only girl. And then we started talking about airplanes and building things, and I said, well, you build airplanes at home, and you design things, and in her case, she loves pink, so she likes to design pink airplanes. I'm like, do you think anyone else is going to design pink airplanes? And she's like, probably not, Mama. She's like, maybe I should stay in class and then design those pink airplanes.
That was a good pep talk.
But but I think it's having that awareness and having that knowledge, and as a young girl, as a young Latina girl, she's going to bring a different perspective, and I think we need more people in our community to do the same.
Right, and I think that you bring up an important point in that we have to embrace our culture and be strong and vocal about it for the right reasons, right? And so, I'm starting to hear more people talking about being bicultural, bilingual, right? Bringing a different lens, and so that is value, right? And so I joke with some of my other friends. I was like, well, then we should be more expensive. Right? We shouldn't be less expensive. We should be more expensive. Right? If you're bringing in this value, right?
Assets, competencies that contribute to making not just our community, but just in general, society a better place. Yeah,
let's flip the conversation instead of saying, oh, well, we don't have enough numbers in tech. It's like, yes, we do have the numbers, but can you afford them? Right? Because we do have the talent, as we all know.
We do, and we do have a lot of talent in this area. I think through some of the meetups and some of the conferences that we've been to together, like the Silicon Valley Leadership Summit that just took, Latino Leadership Summit that just took place last week, and you're able to see just in a room full of Latinos, both of different generations, that have accomplished a lot and are willing to join some of these companies. So how do they get there? What advice would you provide to someone that's just thinking about whether it's joining an established company or a startup? What's your advice of the path to get there?
Well, I think the path becomes a question of, your career path and life journey, right? How do those intersect? And then with respect to, your career options. And so, can you join a startup, right? Or do you want to join a larger company? And so just understanding what the pros and cons are, and then looking at both short-term and long-term, what are some of the milestones that you want to achieve, and what do you want to learn, who do you want to learn from, right? Then we get into mentors, and then get into advisors and champions, and so there's a long list. And so that's also another thing that we need to do a better job of as well, is, how do we ensure that our youth know what a mentor is, and then how do the mentors add value, whether if it's a lifetime or certain periods of their life journey.
And I have to say, to be a mentor, you don't have to be older. I've learned so much, especially when it comes to technology in this space. There are a lot of really young people out there that are doing amazing things that one can learn from. So I think not being intimidated to learn from people that might necessarily, be a different generation from you.
Right.
I think it's important.
Yeah. Now we have a lot of smart young people, right?
So let me ask about your journey. I know that we talked about the startups, but you had to go seek funding. I think your first startup sold for $185 million or something like that. Right. And then you went and founded Picosito.com.
Right.
And in Picosito.com, I think you work with your brother in that.
Yep.
And you guys also went through a seed of funding. And I think, one of the things that when we think about investing in our community or investing in our ideas, what advice would you have for someone that is going to go and kind of do the pitch, because you have gone through,
Right.
you have done multiple pitches.
Right. And so, the number one challenge is always access to capital for any entrepreneur. And so how do you raise that initial round of funding to provide that seed capital to launch your business, right? Your startup, your company. And so, because some of us don't have that rich deal or tias, right? So when we think about our immediate network and extended networks, we don't have those angel investors that can write a 25K check, 50K check, or 100K check, right? So we have to look at other ways to get creative. And so one of the things that I'm really excited about is, being able to leverage the partnership that we have with Republic.co, which is around equity crowdfunding. And so now we have the ability to invite our family and friends to invest into our startups, and by being a non-accredited investor. And so it was that before you had to be an accredited investor in order to invest in a startup, which meant you had to be making $200K a year for the past 3 years or have a net worth of $1 million. Well, that still exists, which that was probably 3% of America. And so then the other 97% couldn't participate as easily because of these SEC regulations. And so now with Republic, crowdfunding for equity, which was, came under Obama in 2012, under the Jobs Act, Reg CF for crowdfunding. Now we've opened up the platform. So we have these online platforms where you can actually look at companies that are raising funding, their seed round, and you can invest as little as $10. And so how do we, one, support our entrepreneurs and being able to raise that seed capital, and then two, how do we create a new generation of Latino angel investors?
Angel investors,
right?
Because we have to invest in the things that we care about, and I think many of us care about our community, but not growing up with capital, sometimes it's hard to think about investments, and I think the way that you talked about, having a $200,000 income for the past 3 years,
Yeah.
or the $1 million cap, you have limited people that would meet that criteria. So I think having more open access, as you mentioned, makes a big difference.
That's correct.
Community.
And a great example would be Martha from Made Boss, and being able to raise the seed round on the Republic platform, 120K, which therefore allowed her to build her prototype, her MVP, minimum viable product, which then that allows her to go talk to corporate clients as potential customers.
And Martha has been doing really well. Are there any other examples of Latinx businesses that you work with that you might want to share with the audience, that people might want to be on the lookout for? Because I think, at least for me, I'd like to learn from others.
Right.
Not everything, I don't have to create everything. Not everything has to start from scratch. I think learning from others and other experiences makes a big difference. Do you have any other examples?
Yeah, I mean, there's a long list now of entrepreneurs, but I would say, one that comes to mind is Luz, who's running Convive, which is all around financial management and wealth. So a simple application, right, helps you manage your finances, which then is culturally tailored to Latinos and diverse communities. And so something that we know is very much needed. And so, how do we ensure that, again, we create that awareness and provide that access to her type of solution in the marketplace? It's all falling under wealth. And then, there are others, but I think, hers is one that's very much needed. And then, one of the other entrepreneurs that you mentioned earlier was Sarai in her Dreamers Roadmap, and providing the tools and resources for dreamers. And so she's done an amazing job in building her platform and being a spokesperson, being an advocate, being a champion, right? So in addition to the technology, also ensuring that she's telling her story and supporting others.
It's a social entrepreneur of some sort too.
Yep.
She's a social entrepreneur. I know we talk about success, and we often get stuck in how to succeed. But in this area especially, it's important to also experience failure, So what advice would you have for those that are thinking about joining a new company, starting their own, or a new venture, and are afraid to fail?
Well, I think that's also a cultural thing, right? We shouldn't fail.
In our community.
Yeah, we shouldn't. We should always be succeeding. Where in tech, it's really the opposite, where they talk about fail fast, right? So what can you build? What's your prototype? What's your MVP that you can put together and test it? And so how do you test it to ensure that you can validate or invalidate your set of hypotheses? And so the quicker you can fail, the more you can learn, and then the more you can iterate on that next version, so that there's this constant process of iteration that builds a better product or service. And so fail is a good thing in the world of tech.
So we'll have to tell our familia that it's okay to fail.
Yes.
It's okay to fail, and that ambition is good, because I know that culturally, many in our community, when we think about some of the qualities of being assertive or of being ambitious, sometimes our community doesn't embrace that fully. I just remember, growing up in a very traditional family, and girls were not supposed to be, ambitious or very aggressive. So I think that it's a mind shift of some sort.
It is.
So what would you say about, changing minds and changing, not necessarily changing our culture, but really changing the way we view certain things?
Yeah, well, it reminds me of the conference that we attended the week before, right? The Be Woke SF. That's led by a good friend, Andrea, and they were talking about the calladitas, right? And so I think it's just more having the ability to educate our families and our communities on what's this thing that we're doing and why it's different, right? And I think it's really important that we showcase these stories, and so using podcasts such as this, using videos that talk about that journey. And so where did they start and where are they today? Right, and where do they want to go? Because those are the aha moments that each Latino family needs to have. Because unfortunately, we still have that old cultural mindset. Right, we're still a nation of immigrants, and so we don't always know what's always best for our kids.
And I think it helps being in the Valley too, because you have immigrants from different parts of the world that understand in some way your story. So I think finding allies within not just the Latino community, but also from other communities, like the Indian American community, that have had that immigrant experience, and having those allies can make a difference. Let's talk about your journey. Let's go back to your journey. It's 1997. You're making your way here from Texas. What advice would you give yourself if you were in the same situation?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Let me get on my time machine.
I know, back into 97. Well, I think I wouldn't change anything because it's been a pretty amazing journey, good and tough times altogether. But I think the thing that I would tell my younger self is really learn more about stock options. Not that I didn't do good, but that's a conversation that some people will never have, and so I wish I would have known more, so I could have been a better negotiator versus just happy receiving stock options. Right.
Well, and we're gonna, in a future episode, we're gonna have someone that's gonna talk about compensation and how to negotiate compensation.
That's great.
And I think it makes a big difference. Yeah, because that's not part of our vocabulary. It's not part of our culture. So I think sometimes we're like, oh, encontré trabajo, I found a job, and everyone is happy about it. But I think there are a lot of details that go into, closing that deal that we're not as aware in terms of, stock options or other parts of a compensation package.
Right. So. Yeah, and that leads into again just having those mentors, and so that's another conversation I had as well. Is it's great that we cheer and champion someone when they're got that first job or got a new job or got a promotion, but then what happens after that? And so how do we better support them so that, okay, we're doing check-ins after a year. Okay, how's it going? Is it time to ask for a raise? Maybe a new project. And so how do we become proactive versus reactive? and being able to plant that seed early on, right? So like, how do we start at middle school so that over time, it just becomes natural.
And then that makes a big difference because you're following a different path. You're thinking about things a bit differently, and it could make you a more assertive and marketable person as well, right?
Correct.
Great. Speaking of some of the great work that you've been doing, I know that startups, when we think of startups, we think about returns on investment, and we think about businesses, but you've also been a founder of some amazing nonprofit startups. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you've done with Career Force, and also you were part of a Salesforce Incubator, and now you're empowering mothers to come you're helping moms come out and be part of the workforce. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, happy to. And so let me start with how that journey began. It's really through my work with Latino Startup Alliance that led to a conversation with Salesforce for Startups. So we did a partnership there, and that led to a conversation with the managing director for the Salesforce Incubator. And so both of those individuals spoke at one of our summits in 2016. And then that's when I had a new idea brewing in my head. And so actually I was going to work on a different startup venture before Career Force. And so I was actually asked if I would like to work at the Salesforce Incubator on my new venture, as well as be the first entrepreneur in residence.
Wow.
So it was an honor, and I feel very blessed, and I tell people that every day. And so I entered into the Salesforce Incubator December 2016. I had an aha moment in January of 2017, and it was really about learning about the Salesforce ecosystem and the company and the growth, the global economy that it has, all the career opportunities, and then also just, we could use a little more diversity. And so that became my new venture, which is Career Force. And so we're training and developing that next generation of Salesforce admins that come from diverse and undersupported communities. And so I embarked with my first cohort July of 2017. We ended up with 30 students day one. We had 21 finish the curriculum. Out of 21, we have 11 newly certified Salesforce admins. Out of those admins, I have someone at Salesforce, have someone that just got a new job or contract job at NASDAQ.
Wow.
And there's others working in the Salesforce ecosystem. And so we'll continue to do that. And then my latest cohort has been moms. So mothers were returning back to the workforce. And so we started with 11. And so we have 10 that are now certified Salesforce admins 201 from that cohort of 11 moms. And so now we're working on placing them in industry.
And this is moms that left the workplace and had their children and probably raised them up to a certain point, and then are coming back to the workforce.
That's correct.
Which is wonderful, because I think sometimes coming back to work after you take a leave, after you've had your child, it makes things harder. Your confidence could be a little bit lower. So I think having these kinds of programs could make a difference for moms. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, well, it's...
As a mom, thank you for doing that.
No, well, it's part of our mission, and that mission is to ensure that we provide the awareness, the access, the training, the certification, the placement, and support for these diverse and undersupported communities. So in addition to diversity, moms, community colleges, dreamers, those over 50, Native Americans, formerly incarcerated, those with disabilities, and then lastly, looking at building a career vocational track for public high schools.
That's wonderful.
And so we have a lot of work to do, but that's what we look at when we think about our roadmap.
And that's your more than one grain of salt. I think you're you're a cup full of contribution to the cause. One last question. I know we've talked about your journey, but there had to be someone in your life, and that just helped shape who you are. Could you talk a bit about who helped you get to where you are and why?
Yes, and proud and happy to share that, it's always been my parents, right? So both of my parents coming over to Mexico, when they were young, 18, 19, and then, meeting in Houston. And so, that's where I was born and raised. And so just their support and guidance all these years. Unfortunately, my dad is no longer with us, but my mom's still there. And she's still on my case every week. And, it was certainly around education and also a career. So education being important to them because, my dad made it up to 9th grade, my mom to 2nd grade. And so education was always discussed as we were growing up. What college are you going to, etc.
They wanted you to have what they didn't have, the opportunities that they didn't have. And I think that you'll hear that that's a story for many of us.
I agree, right? We all have these stories and, we've all had the amazing support of, our parents or our family in ensuring that we have a better life and that we have access to more opportunities. And so, so I still get questioned every week.
Your mom's calling.
Yep, that has not gone away.
No, that's wonderful. What is next for Jesse in terms of your next venture or your next opportunity to serve?
So definitely continue to grow and support CareerForce and ensure that we have more students going through our program so that we can provide them another career option in their life journey. From that, ensuring that we continue to build more value for Latino Startup Alliance. And so being able to establish that home base here at the Impact Hub in San Francisco so that we have a global entrepreneurship and innovation hub for the Americas so that wherever you come from, as a Latino, you have a soft landing here in San Francisco. So that's important to me. And then also working with my other nonprofit, which is Dev Mission. And so that's teaching diverse youth, ages 16 to 24, hardware, IT, coding skills coupled with life, business, and critical thinking to help prepare them for a career in tech. And so that's led by my co-founder and executive director, Leo Sosa, which is doing an amazing job. And so our goal is to expand that here in California and then take it to other cities across the U.S.
Scaling your efforts, which is great.
Yeah.
Always thinking about the next step. Well, thank you, Jesse, for being with us and for the advice. And you are a mentor to many people. I thank you for embracing the idea of me launching a podcast and
for you.
And for being my first guest.
Yes,
and
well, thank you again for having me.
I'm sure we will have you back again. But thank you so much, Jesse.
Thank you.
I hope that you are as inspired as I am by Jesse's journey. Some key takeaways from this episode include understanding the importance of stock options when negotiating compensation. And please note that we will devote a full episode to discuss compensation, which will focus on stock options and other benefits. Take advantage of the fact that technology is providing access to education through online courses, to gadgets to help us monitor our health, and also to tools to increase our participation in investing. Jesse mentioned that you can now invest in tech startups with tools provided by Republic or Robinhood, and it's easier for our community to invest since many barriers have been removed. And finally, he also encouraged us to be lifelong learners and to not be afraid to fail, although keep in mind that we might have to explain why it's okay to fail to our familia. You can learn about the Latino Startup Alliance or CareerForce by connecting directly with Jesse through LinkedIn or by emailing him at jesse@latinostartupalliance.org. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at LatinxAmerica, on Twitter at America Latinx, or email any questions or ideas to latinxamerica@gmail.com. Next Wednesday, Dreamers Roadmap CEO Saraí Espinosa Salamanca will be joining us to discuss activism and tech. So don't forget to tune in. Gracias y hasta la próxima semana.